Welcome to our pilot series of Operation Transmit Leadership. Operation Transmit Leadership is an audio program of local leaders providing insight and mentoring about servant leadership. This program is produced by Michiana-based volunteer team. Program guests are local leaders from all backgrounds, professions, and callings who are recognized for demonstrating outstanding leadership by serving others.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Operation Transmit Leadership. I'm Mike Nabalski, and I'm joined by Operation Transmit Leadership team member Chris Wolf. And this is our fourth program in a series of programs focused on servant leadership. And today we have as our guest Bishop Eddie Miller from the Faith Apostolic Ministries, and also someone who's been very involved for many years in the local community, serves as co-chair of the Group Violence Prevention Task Force from the Mayor's Office, and has been involved in several other local initiatives over the years. So Bishop Eddie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very honored.
To kick this off, could you describe to us in your own words what servant leadership means?
In my opinion, real servant leadership is leadership without ethnic, cultural, social boundaries. Real servant leadership is very inclusive of an entire population of people rather than a designated group of people. And that could be in any capacity. It could be business, it could be in a number of ministry, a different number of capacities. And so servant leadership to me is a leadership that has the heart of the people at hand and forefront. And we'll get into the difference between servant leadership and just leadership, but servant leadership really has the heart and the people at hand, and the major goal to me with real servant leadership is to overall enhance the life of other people.
Great, thank you.
Bishop Eddie, in your opinion, what makes servant leadership different from other leadership styles?
In my opinion, what makes servant leadership so distinguishedly different is, as I said a moment ago, the overall agenda or goal of servant leadership is the people. And it's without boundaries, it's without ethnic or cultural boundaries and social boundaries. It strictly is geared toward enhancing the life of other people. Now, leadership, it's been proven that many people can operate in leadership, and that unfortunately can be good or bad, because people can collectively get people together, but sometimes it's not always for the right reason. And I'm just throwing this out. Adolf Hitler was a great leader, but he wasn't a servant leader. Bernie Madoff, let's face it, he was a great leader, but he wasn't a servant leader. His leadership was somewhat clannish. It was geared toward certain groups and certain individuals to help them. But servant leadership is different in that it doesn't have a lot of boundaries. It's out there to help everybody and anybody.
Good examples. Thank you. Could you give us some background in your early involvement in being called into leadership, into local community?
Well, actually, my real involvement in community and leadership started back in 1974. I was attending a ministry in Buchanan, Michigan, Faith Apostolic Ministries. And sometimes it takes someone with leadership qualities to recognize leadership qualities in others. And my pastor recognized, which I didn't know at the time because I was somewhat a novice, but he recognized that he felt that I had leadership qualities. Worked with me, nurtured me, and in 1979, my wife and I felt that we wanted to enhance or endorse the church that we belonged to at that time, but the good Lord felt like he needed us to do something different. So then we started a ministry here in South Bend. Actually, we started in our living room in our home because we thought if we could disciple people, we could get them to transfer to our home church. But it didn't work out because between South Bend and Buchanan, which I'm from Buchanan originally, to some people you say, I'm in South Bend, Indiana, but you want to take me to church in Buchanan, Michigan. That seems like an eternity to some people. It's only 14 miles. But we found out that wouldn't work out. And so what we did was we initially started out in a little storefront church, just really trying to determine how we could enhance our other church by bringing disciples to the Lord. And it bloomed into a ministry. And so from that to this, we started out in that ministry in 1979, September of 79. There was actually only 4 members in the church: myself, my wife, and my 2 sons. Of course, I had 2 daughters after that. But the ministry has grown from that point. And what happened was, during that transition, as you work with people, you get more of a heart for people. And the people can tell when you care and when you don't care. You can have the best food in the world, but if you've got poor service, people won't come to your restaurant. It's just the way it is. Some people that serve in a servant capacity, to be honest with you, they don't have the heart for it, and they don't recognize that. They do it because they're appointed to it. But real servant leadership is something that it's like a talent that God gives you. It's a heart that God gives you. And you can train people to be good servants, don't get me wrong, but real servant leadership comes out of compassion and the biological makeup that God gives you. But anyway, from that 4-member church started in 1979. We average in attendance now about 600 a week, just in attendance. And there's hundreds and hundreds that say they belong to our ministry, but I mean people you can touch. We probably 600. Last week, because it was Easter, we had probably 900. But I'm just saying, because people can tell whether you love and really care about them. And that's what servant leadership is letting people feel you. And some people are afraid to expose their feelings but for fear of rejection or being hurt. But if you're really going to be in a servant leadership, you're going to get disappointed sometimes. You're going to get hurt sometimes. I mean, hey, that's part of it. You know.
Point. You mentioned the person up in Buchanan, the pastor who spotted those qualities in you.
Pastor Aphrodite, yes.
Yes. What other mentors? I know that's one of our questions for that we had planned. Other mentors in your background who helped bring you along to where you're at now.
Believe it or not, I don't just get inspiration from religious leaders and community leaders, but I get inspiration from athletes. I get inspiration from people that are in the entertainment field. I mean, I love Denzel Washington's acting, but I wouldn't go and watch a movie if only Denzel was in it. I'm just saying. And I look at people like it's his supporting cast that makes him who he is. I look at the Chicago Bulls and the level of success that they've had with Michael Jordan when he was there. They won 5, 6 championships. But what Michael Jordan did was he realized that he was talented, but he couldn't win it by himself. He had to have a team. And so he took people like Jud Bushler, he took people like Steve Kerr, Scottie Pippen, guys that did have talent, but all that talent together is what made the team. And in servant leadership, you have to surround your people that have a heart or a passion for what you're doing. And so a big part of that is I'm inspired by people from the athletic world. I watch them, how they build teams, people in the community, government, how government functions, and the team that they build. And so inspiration comes from different sources.
That's great.
What traits, Bishop Eddie, would you look for or see in people and want to help them become more in servant leadership? I mean, what are those traits that stick out the most to you that are important to servant leadership?
I look at people that are personable people. Everybody's not a people person, and I understand that. Some people are more introverted, and I understand that. But a person that's really in the servant leadership has to have somewhat of a outward personality, and I look for that in people. And then I look for what kind of compassion do they have? What kind of heart do they have? Do they really care about people? Unfortunately, some people just don't like people. They don't work very good in servant leadership. So I look for those traits or characteristics in people. I look to see what kind of compassion, what kind of heart they have, how they reach out and interact with other people. Those are the things that I look for when I choose people in positions of leadership within our ministry.
Thank you.
It's great.
Bishop Eddie, you do so much community work, and you do deal with interesting characters. Servant leadership does appear to come natural to you, but what do you do to kind of have to, sometimes check yourself or get yourself to remind yourself that I'm here to lead these people, I'm here to help these people, and even if they don't want it.
Right. I think the thing sometimes that leaders have to recognize is that as much as you want to help everybody, you can't help everybody. Helping people, a big part of it is having trust in you as a leader. And sometimes people are normally resistant because they've been hurt or they've been rejected so much that when you're offering them a service or you're offering them an opportunity, the natural inclination is just to just be suspicious, and that's what happens a lot of times. People are suspicious of you. It's like sometimes you're just nice to people, and they think that there's a catch to it. And I think the biggest disappointment to me a lot of times is just the fact that people will reject help when you're actually sincerely with no motives trying to help them. And I think that stems a lot of times from the fact that they've been disappointed and hurt so many times in their past.
So on the flip side, can you share any success stories that come to mind? For example, on your work with the violence prevention group, or any success stories where servant leadership and trying to mentor locally has really
That's
helped?
a broad question. I got a lot of them. I'm the old guy, I told you, man. I teach people at church, and I tell them, because whenever I preach or teach, and I don't do a lot, but I teach every so often because we have a mixed group of young and old, and to keep the balance, we do that. But I said, well, I got some stories I want to tell you. When I say stories, I mean life's experiences. So I have a lot of them now. But yeah, I can elaborate on that. Mm-hmm. But some of my greatest thrills or achievements or accomplishments have been able to go out and work with people in the public that maybe were thinking about committing suicide or killing themselves. And one particular incident, there's been a number of them, but one particular incident that I can recall right off the top of my head is that one day I was at church, and for whatever reason, and I like to think it was good Lord, I went outside to get something out of the trunk of my car. So while I'm at the trunk of my car with the trunk open, I feel this person behind me. And he was on a bicycle, a grown man, and he was crying. I'm like, wow, what's going on? So he says, Reverend, can I talk to you? I said, sure. And I didn't know the guy at the time. I remember his name now, but I didn't know at the time. So I took him inside, and we started talking, and he said, he was crying, and he said, I saw you in the trunk of your car, and he said, I'm on my way to commit suicide. And it really touched me. He said, now you see this bike I'm riding? He said, I borrowed this bike. He said, I don't own a vehicle. The clothes I got on, these are the only clothes I have. And he said, my girlfriend left me, I don't have a job. And he said, I'm riding this bike on the way to kill myself. And of course, the success part of that story is that when he came in, I offered him help. I said, man, come on, we got to find you someplace to live. I said, we got to get you some clothes. Of course, I prayed with him and all the religious things we do. And I took him down to Salvation Army at the time, and I remember, and I bought him some new clothes and bought him some different things, and finally found him a place to stay. And even to this day, when he sees me, he tells people, this is the man that saved my life. So to me, that's a great success story, to know that you helped somebody continue to have a desire to live.
Absolutely.
Bishop, can you describe or give us an example of servant leadership you've seen other people that you've been working with in the community where they've led you and led others in a manner?
A lot of times, as I said earlier, I've learned and tried to critique my ability in servant leadership through seeing the successful leadership of others. And I watched others that have gone on before me that have passed on, and I watched the compassion and I watched the love and the leadership that they displayed in the public, and I tried to pattern myself after that, having people, like I said, the community overall as a concern rather than any personal agenda. And those are the type of things that really inspired me to want to be a greater leader. And not only just on a local level, but on a national level, I watch leaders that really have a compassionate heart for people.
You gave us some history earlier before we began the program, but could you walk us through some of the things you're involved with locally?
You know what? Years ago, my initial motive or goal was just to reach people, to help them turn their lives around socially, economically. That was just my initial goal, was to, through ministry, just do that. Now that our ministry has evolved to another level, because I have all my children, I have 4 children that work with me in ministry, as well as my wife, instead of being so concentrated on in-reach with the building of the ministry, now I can reach outside the ministry and I can do more outreach, which allows me to be involved in more social entities. Initially, when the ministry started and I started, I was young and I didn't have the opportunities to reach outside the church as much as I do now. But with my family involved and all the other leaders that we have in our ministry, it gives me opportunity to be involved in other entities. I remember years ago when I probably had been in ministry maybe 20, 25 years. First Source Bank approached me about being on their board for the community. And I thought, man, I don't know anything about banking, but the goal of the whole board was not to know anything about banking. It was to reach out to the people in public and let them know that they had a friendly lending source that was willing to help them with whatever. And so I learned a lot through that first experience, and then from there I went on, was approached by the Heritage Foundation, South Bend Heritage Foundation, which does a lot of structural changes within our city in blighted areas. And it would take me too long to tell you about all of that. But when I saw that we were not only building new structures and we're not only changing structures in our city, I saw how that those structural changes changed people's lives. And so that gave me a greater love for that. I was with them for 18 years, and we changed a lot of lives through changing people's living conditions. And that, again, I felt like was an extension of the ministry that I was always trying to do. And then from then I went on to a number of other involvements, and I got a call one day from the mayor's office, and they said, well, hey, listen, we need you to come onto the Board of Public Safety. And I thought, man, I got too much going on already. And I told them no initially, to be honest with you. And so at the time, Steve Lickey was the mayor, and he said, well, take a week and think about it. So I said, all right, I'll take a week and think about it. So they called me back. They called me on a Monday. They called me back that Friday. And I said, well, I talked it over with my wife. She thinks I should do it. So I've been on there since 2009. I've been on the Board of Public Safety for the city of South Bend. And I tell you, it's been one of my greatest relationships in public services, because you get to see people promoted, and unfortunately you have to have disciplines as well. But overall, the promotions and to see people excited about a new career, either in fire department or with law enforcement, is very gratifying. And so I enjoy that part of it. And I was approached by the Goodwill Industries. Goodwill Industries started a high school program here in our city. If you're not familiar with it, what it is people that are 18 years old and older that didn't have an opportunity to get a Core 40 diploma can have the opportunity to get a Core 40 diploma now through Goodwill Industries, and it's free of charge.
That's the Excel Center?
The Excel Center. And it does, they do daycare, they give you free bus passes, and they offer classes, and they offer you a life coach that'll help you through your classes. And we've graduated two different classes here in South Bend, and to watch people that thought, with families that thought they could never have a high school diploma, get the opportunity to get a grant to go on to college, that's very gratifying. So
it's a great program.
To me, it's just it's an extension of ministry, caring about people, seeing people's lives change in a positive way.
So knowing the community as deeply as you obviously do, what advice, based on your observations, what advice could you give to up-and-coming leaders, people who need mentoring and direction, but who have those qualities you mentioned to make good servant leaders? What advice would you give to them as far as where the needs are, what they can do?
Well, I think every leader, and I know it's not that way realistically, but every leader has to understand that it's a team effort. It's not about you. It's about building the lives of other people. And sometimes, unfortunately, like I said, we don't all have the same DNA. We don't all have the same makeup. But sometimes people, they have the ability to lead people, but they don't really have the people's interests at hand. And I think if I was going to give advice to people, is to make sure that if you're going to be in leadership, that the best interest of the people is at hand. And I see a lot of times too many people in leadership with the wrong motives. And so, like I said earlier, and this is not to bash Bernie Madoff or anybody, but it just shows you can lead people, but you can lead them the wrong way. So, again, I think compassion, the concern of the people, enhancing the life of those around you. When you see those things, those are the things that motivate you to want to keep going.
It's good advice.
Bishop, before we close, is there some things you'd like to exemplify that we didn't kind of go over yet, or questions we didn't ask, to help for you to promote servant leadership?
Well, in my opinion, servant leadership doesn't just look at the past and the present, it looks toward the future. And it sees how that it's going to enhance the life of the community, of the nation, of the people individually. down the road. I mean, there's things that you plant as a servant leader that you may not never see the results of. But you look down the road and say, hey, my kids, my grandkids, my neighbor, they'll reap the benefits from it. And I think great servant leaders, that's what they did. They looked like, hey, this, I may not be able to see the fruit of this in my lifetime, but my kids or grandkids or my neighbors will see it down the road. And I think that's what excites me about being a part of GVI, Group Violence Intervention Strategy, which I work with Rose Meisner and Pete Morgan on that. But I see these young men, and we're unfortunately getting young ladies involved in this too, that have data tracked records that have caused offenses in our community. I may not get to see those people lives really change myself, but down the road when they're holding their grandkids, when they're holding their kids, rather than being locked in prison or being a victim of a homicide, that in my opinion is gratifying to know that one day, I never dreamed as a kid, I never dreamed I'd be holding my grandkids. But now here I'm in my 60s, I'm holding my grandkids and playing with them. See these guys and these girls down the road, to know that one day they'll hold their grandkids. That's gratifying to me.
Bishop Eddie, you've given us some great information, and as our team here knows, you and I do know each other from local community and through the local health club, and so this is just out of curiosity if you could comment on what you think the role of physical fitness and activity as it relates to a holistic view of life. One of our program days in the leadership program had to do with mind, body, and spirit. And so beyond your role in spirituality and your faith ministry, can you comment on what your opinion is on physical fitness and just being, leading an active life and good diet and all of that, if you have anything you want to share with that?
Well, I think you did a pretty good job of defining it there, to be honest with you, because in servant leadership, be it made ministry or business or whatever entity it is, if you're going to be a real servant for the community, you have to take the initiative to take care of yourself. And it's a mind, body, soul thing. I mean, if my spirit is all jacked up, then it's going to affect other areas of my life. I've just, through my little research and studying that I've done, I've found that most of our physical problems that we have are because of a lack of self-discipline ourselves. And emotionally, mentally, the mind has to be right as well, because a lot of times our psychosomatic emotions or emotions that we hold on to, either good or bad, they affect our physical body, and most people don't understand it. Things like bitterness, hatred, unforgiveness, those things have been medically connected to cancers and different tumors and ulcers and things that we go through in our physical body. So I try to promote to people that you not only have to spiritually take care of yourself, you got to physically take care of yourself. You got to eat right, you got to sleep right. My joke to people all the time is the good Lord will help you, but you got to help yourself. Now, that's just the way it is,
Yes.
You can't put all the work on Him. You can't go out and eat double cheeseburgers in the middle of the night and ice cream and cake and expect to be healthy. I mean, you got to have some type of disciplines in your life. So I think that more than anything, I try to tell people moderation and disciplines in your life will lead to a healthier life.
Awesome.
Bishop Eddie,
Yes.
thank you so much for your community service and then coming and sharing your servant leadership views with us today.
I am honored to be here, and I pray that I can, as I said, be somewhat of a support and encouragement to other people, and that's what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
And I appreciate you all having enough confidence in me to even invite me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Listeners, if you want to find more information about Bishop Eddie, you can find him at www.faithgrows.net, and that's www.faithgrows.net.
The opinions expressed in this program are of the guests and are not explicitly those of the Operation Transmit Leadership Group. Our guests are volunteers and have donated their time to promote servant leadership.
This Operation Transmit Leadership program was produced by Kyle Bradamus, Kayla Myers, Mike Dabalski, Jody Russell, Laura Veramontes, and Chris Wolf. You can find more programs on our Facebook page, Operation Transmit Leadership.
Any views or opinions represented in this series of audio interviews are personal and belong solely to Operation Transmit Leadership and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in professional or personal capacity, unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual. All content provided on the audio program series is for informational purposes only. Operation Transmit Leadership will not be liable for any errors or omissions in this information, nor for the availability of this information. The program, producers, and participants will not be liable for any losses, injuries, or damages from the listening, displaying, or any other use of this content or information. Any content, usage, or reproduction is not authorized without the explicit approval of the Operation Transmit Leadership team.